Our devotion today comes from Isaiah chapter 11. Before we look at it, I want to remind you to be in prayer for the Dane family. That is Seth and Beth, and Amelia and Brielle, and Thea and Truett. So, Isaiah chapter 11 is an incredible chapter, right? Just kind of like last time in Pastor Mike's devotion, I'm sure that as you read through this, we see a whole lot of Jesus here, don't we? We know who this is talking about. This is a prophecy looking forward to the coming Christ. It starts out with this interesting image, and it's one that's familiar to us. It talks about this stump of Jesse that this shoot from the roots is going to grow up out of and bear fruit. When you think about a stump, it's an image of death, right? It's you usually don't think about a tree regrowing out of a stump. When you see that, you think that tree is done and it's had its day. And I imagine that a lot of the nations, and even Israel and Judah themselves, maybe after they experience God's judgment and they experience this reproof that He's bringing on them, and these other huge nations came and took over, and God was using them to judge His people, I'm sure even His people looked and said, we're a stump. We're not what God wanted us to be. We're not certainly what His promises said we're going to be. And we've passed our glory days. We've reached the end of our time. And think about how long they went. I mean, they were ruled by the Assyrians and the Babylonians, the Persians and the Medes and the Persians, the Greeks and the Romans. And I think by the time that these prophecies of God calling them back and making them into what He wants them to be and bringing this Christ who He's promising, they really were like a stump. I think there was probably not many nations that thought very much of Israel, of Judah, of considering them to be of very much importance. And yet, we know that God's promises stand. And He's saying, you're going to be like a stump. Jesse's lineage, the one that I said was going to last forever and was always going to have a king, there is going to be a shoot that comes up out of that stump. So what were they expecting? Of course, they knew that this Christ was going to come. The Jewish people knew about these prophecies. And one of the things that it says about Him, which helps us understand, a lot of these prophecies, some of them haven't been fulfilled yet. We're still looking towards when the Christ fulfilled these prophecies. He says He will strike the earth with the rod of His mouth. With the breath of His lips, He will slay the wicked. They were expecting the Christ to come and to do that, and to drive out these wicked nations, to bring back His chosen people, to give them their land, to set up rule over the entire earth. It's one of the reasons why when you read in Acts, and this is fresh in my mind because we've been studying the book of Acts in my Tuesday morning Bible study, one of the things Paul did was he would go around to Jewish people and he would reason with them that the Christ had to come to suffer, to die, and to be resurrected again. They didn't understand that because that stuff, the suffering servant, it's also here in Isaiah's prophecies and in the Old Testament. It was the fact that the Christ was going to come and He was going to win the victory over sin. Of course, we know that He's coming again. As sure as those promises were true, He is coming again, and He will smite the wicked with the breath of His mouth. He will be, and He is the King of kings and the Lord of lords, but He will set up His rule and reign here on earth. He will gather His people to Jerusalem. The Lord is faithful. I think that's what I get when I read this today. We know His promises are true, and it's just what Pastor Mike talked about last time. But then I love that image of the root coming out of the stump. It's so similar to me, to those images of when God takes a woman who is barren or a couple who can't have a child, and He gives them life. He brings life out of death. And in the case of Mary, to give birth to a baby, and she didn't even have a husband. There was no father to the baby. God is doing that with the nation of Israel. He's bringing life where there was no life before. I'm thankful that God was willing to do that for us, to give us life when we didn't deserve it. We had won death for ourselves. But thankful for the scripture today, and if God revealed something to you out of it, I'd ask you to leave us a message on Facebook and on YouTube. God bless you guys. Thank you very much.